fraud investigation targeting the state's Somali community. So in a post to social media last night, FBI Director Kash Patel announced a surge in federal agents and investigative resources.
4:47 a.m. Washington, D.C. The city slept under a blanket of February darkness. Frost clung to the windows of federal buildings. Street lights flickered against wet pavement. But inside FBI headquarters, no one was sleeping. 3 blocks from Capitol Hill, in a secure briefing room with reinforced doors and signal jammers, Director Marcus Caldwell stood before 73 assembled agents. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. Justice itself has been weaponized. The room went still. What he said next would change everything, not just for the agents in that room, for an entire network that had spent 7 years hiding in plain sight. The target was not a drug den, not a cartel safe house, not a warehouse full of contraband. It was an office, a federally recognized nonprofit coordination center, responsible for certifying humanitarian organizations across the eastern seaboard. An entity trusted by the State Department, audited by oversight boards, praised by elected officials. At its center, a married couple with flawless records, impeccable credentials, and combined authority that had allowed them to move $705.3 million through channels so clean, so legitimate, so trusted that no alarm bell ever rang. Until now. If you want to see how 2 people turned justice into a cartel pipeline, hit like so this story reaches more people. Let me show you how this happened. 4:52 a.m. the countdown began. Tactical units moved into position across the Capitol, not just one location. 17 simultaneous breach points spanning Maryland, Virginia, and the district itself. FBI, DEA, ICE, U.S. Marshals. Over 340 federal agents deploying in the cold pre-dawn darkness. No sirens, no lights, just encrypted radio traffic and the low hum of diesel engines idling 3 blocks out. The primary target sat on 7th Street, wedged between a Veterans Advocacy Center and a legal research institute. 4 stories, modest brass plaque, door that opened every weekday at 9 a.m. sharp. Somali Justice Coordination Office, legal aid and nonprofit certification services. The sign looked so ordinary, so official, so trustworthy. But what federal agents were about to find inside would rewrite the definition of institutional corruption. At 4:58 a.m., the breach teams received final authorization. At 5:03 a.m., the door came down. The hydraulic ram struck with a sound like thunder. Flashbangs detonated in the entry corridor. Agents in tactical gear flooded the stairwell. The office was empty. No staff, no resistance. Just the hum of servers and the faint smell of coffee still warm in the break room pot. But on the 2nd floor, behind a locked conference room door, they found the first cash. $11.3 million in cash, vacuum sealed, stacked in banker boxes. Each one labeled Emergency Relief Disbursements, pending authorization. On the 3rd floor, inside what appeared to be a supply closet, agents discovered a hidden server room. Cables snaked through false walls. Satellite uplinks transmitted data in real time, not to government databases, to offshore routing hubs in Dubai, Singapore, and Panama City. And in the executive suite on the 4th floor, inside a mahogany desk that required a forensic locksmith to breach, they found something that made even the most seasoned investigators pause. A handwritten ledger, steel reinforced, meticulously organized, every transaction logged, every false certification documented. 7 years of operations laid bare in clean block letters. At the top of the first page, 2 names: Dr. Hassan Yusuf Abdi, Senior Director, Justice Coordination and NGO Certification Authority. Amina Khadija Abdi, Compliance Supervisor, Emergency Fund Oversight. Husband and wife, 2 careers, 1 system. Combined authority that bypassed State Department verification protocols, approved emergency funds without audit trails, and certified nonprofits without external review, all under the guise of expedited humanitarian relief. By 6:19 a.m., the building was secured. The office was silent, but the storm was only beginning, because what federal agents had just uncovered was not a rogue operation. It was an architecture, a financial masterpiece built not with threats or violence, but with signatures, seals, and the absolute trust of a system that never thought to question the integrity of justice itself. Comment exposed if you're ready to see what they found next. 6:34 a.m. FBI Cyber Forensics Command Center, Hoover Building. The room was cold, lit only by the pale glow of monitors and the red blink of active decryption protocols. Analysts sat in near silence, fingers moving across keyboards, eyes locked on cascading data streams pulled from the seized servers. At 6:41 a.m., the first firewall fell. What came into view was a network so intricate, so carefully layered, that senior analyst Derek Wu had to stop and reread the schema twice before he believed what he was seeing. He leaned into his headset. "Command, we have confirmation. This isn't corruption. This is architecture." On the primary monitor, a digital map unfolded like a spider web. 148 registered nonprofit organizations, each one certified by the Somali Justice Coordination Office. Each one granted expedited status under emergency humanitarian provisions. Each one operating across 12 states, Maryland to Minnesota, Virginia to Michigan, Pennsylvania to Ohio, and every single one was a shell, no staff, no physical offices, no program reports. Just bank accounts, wire transfer histories, and recurring deposits labeled grant disbursements, legal aid reimbursements, and emergency resettlement funds. The money flowed in one direction, from federal and state emergency aid pools through the NGO network, into a labyrinth of intermediary accounts that fragmented, recombined, and vanished within 72 hours. Then it reappeared, not as currency, as logistics. Analysts traced the flow backward through encrypted ledgers recovered from the office servers, through transaction logs embedded in falsified grant applications, through authorization codes that required 2 signatures to activate. Every code bore the same dual authentication. Dr. Hassan Yusuf Abdi and Amina Khadija Abdi. Their power was not singular, it was shared. Reinforced, at home they were partners, at work they were gatekeepers. Together they had built a system where neither could act alone but both could authorize anything. This was their strength. Checks and balances, the very principle designed to prevent abuse, had become their shield. If this shocks you, hit like now. At 7:02 a.m., analysts uncovered the operation's code name. Buried in a deleted server partition marked Archive Fiscal Review 2019. Project Sanctuary. The name was not ironic, it was literal. The network had been designed to provide sanctuary, not for refugees, for money that needed to move undetected through the most scrutinized corridors in the country. The forensics team traced $705.3 million in total flows across 7 years. The funds passed through nonprofit grant applications, many filed under emergency provisions that bypassed standard State Department and USAID review. Each application was immaculate, mission statements aligned with federal priorities, budgets balanced to the cent, board members listed with real names and real addresses, but none of it was real. Deeper analysis revealed the final destination: wire transfers to logistics contractors in Nogales, Arizona, shipping manifests for freight routes running from the southwest border to distribution hubs in Baltimore, Detroit, and Minneapolis, convoys moving under the protection of falsified nonprofit transit permits, authorized by the very office that was supposed to regulate them. And at every step, the same forensic signature: encrypted authorization keys linked to Sinaloa cartel financial coordinators. This was not a rogue bureaucrat skimming funds. This was command-level coordination. The Abdis had not been bribed. They had been embedded. At 7:19 a.m., the lead analyst delivered the final assessment to FBI command. They didn't infiltrate the system. They became the system. The room went silent, because what they were looking at was not negligence. It was precision. The couple had turned justice coordination into cartel logistics, and they had done it with nothing more than flawless paperwork, lawful approvals, and the absolute trust of a system that never thought to doubt them. This was not a crime hidden in shadows. It was a crime hidden in order. Type yes if you're ready to see what happened next. 7:48 a.m. Joint Federal Operations Command, undisclosed location. The digital map on the main screen pulsed with red markers. Not just Washington, D.C. Not just one office. Across the eastern seaboard, from Maryland to Michigan, over 73 locations lit up in synchronized precision. Each one had been flagged by forensic accountants over the last 4 hours. NGO offices, resettlement centers, legal aid clinics, storage facilities registered under nonprofit tax IDs. Every single one tied to Project Sanctuary. At 7:51 a.m., FBI Director Caldwell gave the order. Execute the sweep, all targets, simultaneous breach. No warnings. The mission was codenamed Operation Shattered Trust. Within minutes, over 1,100 federal agents mobilized across 6 states. FBI, DEA, ICE, SWAT teams in armored vehicles. Black Hawk helicopters lifted off from staging areas near Joint Base Andrews, their rotors slicing through the cold morning air. Naval assets moved into position along the Chesapeake Bay to intercept any attempted maritime escapes. This was not a raid. This was a siege. At 8:03 a.m., the first breach occurred in Baltimore, Maryland, a legal aid nonprofit office on the 3rd floor of a downtown commercial building. Agents entered with warrants in hand. The office was abandoned, desks cleared, computers wiped. But behind a false wall in the storage closet, they found what the occupants couldn't carry: $18.7 million in bundled cash, and a steel filing cabinet containing handwritten ledgers identical in format to the one seized in D.C. At 8:11 a.m., agents hit a resettlement coordination center in Detroit, Michigan. The front was immaculate: pamphlets in 6 languages, intake forms, children's toys in the waiting area. The back office was a different story. Servers were still warm. Encrypted phones lay smashed on the floor. And in a locked basement storage unit, agents discovered 940 kilograms of cocaine. Vacuum-sealed, stacked in shipping crates labeled educational materials, diplomatic exemption. At 8:24 a.m., ICE tactical units breached a warehouse complex outside Richmond, Virginia. The facility was registered as a nonprofit furniture distribution hub for refugee families. Inside, they found no furniture. What they found were 2.1 million fentanyl pills, pressed and packaged in industrial quantities, bearing cartel stamps identical to seizures made along the Arizona border 6 months earlier. Resistance was sporadic but real. At a logistics office in Silver Spring, Maryland, 2 armed men attempted to flee through a rear loading dock. Agents deployed spike strips, intercepted both suspects within 4 blocks. Inside their vehicle, $6.2 million in cash and encrypted hard drives still connected to Live Network streams. At a nonprofit headquarters in Philadelphia, guards attempted to barricade the main entrance and destroy computer equipment. Federal units breached through secondary fire exits, while cyber forensics agents remotely mirrored the servers before they could be wiped. The firefight lasted 9 minutes. 2 suspects were wounded. No agents were killed. By 9:07 a.m., the scale of the operation became undeniable. Across 6 states, federal teams had seized $287 million in cash and frozen accounts, 4.8 tons of narcotics, including cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl, 19 server farms containing financial records dating back to 2017, 63 vehicles, many modified with concealed compartments, 94 suspects detained, including nonprofit directors, compliance officers, logistics coordinators, and armed security contractors. But the most devastating discovery came at 9:34 a.m., when analysts at FBI headquarters completed the first-pass reconstruction of the full financial web. Project Sanctuary had not been confined to the United States. Wire transfer logs revealed connections to logistics hubs in Tijuana, shell corporations in Panama, and freight coordinators in West Africa. The network had moved narcotics, cash, and falsified legal documents across 3 continents, using nonprofit transit permits and diplomatic carriage exemptions to bypass customs inspections at U.S. ports of entry. The operation had turned refugee resettlement into a smuggling corridor, legal aid into money laundering, justice coordination into cartel command infrastructure. At 9:41 a.m., DEA Command issued a revised threat assessment. This network processed more narcotics logistics in 7 years than the last 4 major cartel operations combined. The underworld had taken a blow it would not recover from for years. But the real question was not how much had been seized. It was how much had already moved, and how long it had been moving under the protection of a system designed to help the most vulnerable people on Earth. Share this video so more people understand what happened. 10:52 a.m. Federal Detention Facility, Washington, D.C. The interrogation rooms filled quickly. Suspects were separated, processed, and isolated. No communication, no coordination, just silence and the slow, grinding pressure of evidence that could not be denied. But as investigators pressed forward, a new pattern emerged, one that made even the hardest agents pause. The network had not just corrupted civilians, it had penetrated law enforcement itself. At 11:03 a.m., Forensic accountants cross-referenced the seized financial logs with federal employee records. The matches were immediate and damning. 12 ICE border inspectors had received recurring deposits from shell accounts tied to Project Sanctuary. Amounts ranged from $8,000 to $35,000 per month, disguised as consulting fees, legal retainers, or nonprofit board stipends. 7 DEA field analysts had flagged suspicious shipments, then quietly closed the cases within 48 hours. Their case closure reports cited insufficient evidence or administrative priority shifts. Each closure was followed within days by a wire transfer to an offshore account in their name. 4 federal prosecutors had declined to pursue cases involving sanctuary-linked nonprofits, citing procedural issues or resource constraints. 3 of those prosecutors later received donations to personal legal defense funds or family trust accounts from entities that no longer existed. The corruption was not dramatic, it was methodical. Payments were small enough to avoid automatic banking flags. Transactions were spaced months apart. Every dollar carried a plausible explanation. This was not bribery by explosion. It was erosion by precision. At 11:41 a.m., agents interviewed a veteran ICE supervisor who had worked the D.C.-Maryland corridor for over a decade. His name was being withheld, but his testimony was not. He described how certain shipments were flagged for inspection, then mysteriously cleared before physical review. How patrol schedules were adjusted without explanation, creating gaps in coverage that aligned perfectly with convoy transit windows. How internal audit requests were delayed, rerouted, or quietly archived. "I raised it twice," he said, his voice flat. "Both times I was told it was a staffing issue, a budget issue, a priority issue. After a while you stop asking, because asking makes you the problem." This was the second crime, not the money. Not the drugs, the silence. By noon, federal command had issued arrest warrants for 19 current and former law enforcement personnel, spanning ICE, DEA, Customs and Border Protection, and the U.S. Marshals Service. Charges ranged from bribery and conspiracy to obstruction of justice and facilitating narcotics trafficking. The arrests were executed quietly. No press conferences, no public statements, just agents escorting colleagues out of federal buildings in handcuffs, past coworkers who had worked beside them for years and never suspected a thing. At 12:47 p.m., the FBI deputy director addressed senior command in a closed session. His words were not recorded, but they were repeated by every agent who heard them. "What we're looking at is a parallel enforcement system, one that protected the network by selectively neutralizing the system designed to stop it. They didn't destroy oversight, they became oversight. The evidence bore it out. Over 7 years, at least 83 federal enforcement actions had been initiated against entities tied to Project Sanctuary. All but 6 were closed without prosecution. Case files revealed patterns of delayed warrants, lost evidence logs, and incomplete witness interviews. The system had not failed, it had been steered, and the people steering it had worn the same badges as the agents now dismantling it. By mid-afternoon, the scale of internal compromise was undeniable. The network had not needed to fight the system. It had simply paid the system to look the other way. One decision, one signature, one closed case at a time. This was the real fortress, not walls, not guns. Just trust, routine, and the belief that the people enforcing the law would never become the law's greatest obstacle. The badge was not a shield anymore. It was evidence. Comment justice if you believe the system can be fixed. 2:13 p.m. FBI Strategic Intelligence Division, Quantico, Virginia. The map on the wall was no longer regional. It was continental. Analysts had spent the last 4 hours connecting data points from the seized servers, cross-referencing shipping logs, wire transfer timestamps, and cellular tower pings. What emerged was not a single pipeline. It was a distribution matrix, precise, redundant, national in scope. At 2:19 p.m., the lead intelligence officer briefed command on the full extent of Project Sanctuary's reach. This network didn't just operate in the eastern seaboard. It used the eastern seaboard as a hub. From there, it fed secondary routes into the Midwest, the South, and as far west as Nevada. The routes were disguised as legitimate nonprofit operations. Refugee resettlement convoys moved across state lines under federal transit permits, carrying not families but fentanyl. Legal aid shipments entered port cities like Baltimore and Norfolk, labeled as humanitarian relief supplies. inspected under diplomatic carriage exemptions, cleared without physical searches. Once inside, the shipments were broken down and redistributed through a network of subcontractors. Many of them registered as minority-owned small businesses or women-led social enterprises. On paper, they provided logistical support for resettlement programs. In reality, they moved narcotics from safe houses to distribution hubs in cities like Cleveland, Nashville, and Kansas City. The efficiency was staggering. Over 7 years, Project Sanctuary had moved an estimated 19 tons of narcotics into the U.S. interior, generating over $2.4 billion in black market revenue. And because the shipments moved under nonprofit protections, they bypassed weigh stations, avoided random inspections, and triggered no alerts in federal trafficking databases. At 2:31 p.m., analysts uncovered the final phase of the operation, buried in encrypted files labeled Expansion Protocol, Phase 3. The Abdis had not been content with coordination. They had been planning consolidation. Phase 3 outlined a blueprint for transforming the Somali Justice Coordination Office into a federally recognized oversight body, with authority to audit other nonprofit certification agencies, recommend policy reforms to Congress, train new compliance officers across multiple federal departments. In other words, they intended to scale the system, to make it permanent, to turn a criminal network into the standard operating model for an entire sector of government. The plan had been scheduled to begin implementation in early 2026, but it required one final element: legislative endorsement. And according to the files, they were close. Draft language for a nonprofit oversight reform bill had already been circulated to 3 congressional offices, each one citing the Somali Justice Coordination Office as a model for efficiency and accountability in humanitarian operations. The bill had bipartisan co-sponsors. It had been praised in think tank briefings. It was 2 committee votes away from a floor hearing. At 2:47 p.m., the intelligence officer paused, staring at the screen. Then he said quietly, "If we hadn't moved today, this network wouldn't have been dismantled. It would have been codified." The room went silent, because what they were looking at was not just a crime. It was a blueprint for permanent infiltration, designed not to hide from government, but to become government. The operation had been built on a simple truth: the most dangerous threats are not the ones that break the system. They're the ones that learn to inherit it. By 3:00 p.m., Federal Command issued a classified threat advisory to every agency involved in nonprofit oversight, refugee services, and emergency legal aid. The message was clear: trust nothing, verify everything, assume compromise until cleared. Across the country, audits were launched. Certifications were frozen. Nonprofit transit permits were suspended pending review. It was an extraordinary measure, one that would disrupt legitimate programs and delay critical services. But the alternative was worse, because for 7 years, justice had been used as cover, and no one had noticed until it was almost too late. If you're still watching, tap like so more people see this story. 6:34 p.m. Washington, D.C. The sun was setting over the Capitol. Street lights flickered on. Traffic resumed its evening crawl. From the outside, the city looked the same. But inside federal buildings across Washington, the work was only beginning. At 6:41 p.m., FBI Command released the final operational summary. The numbers were overwhelming. $705.3 million seized or frozen. 4.8 tons of narcotics removed from circulation. 148 shell nonprofits identified and decertified. 94 suspects in custody, including the Abdis. 19 federal law enforcement personnel arrested for corruption and obstruction. Over 1,200 fraudulent transactions traced and flagged for audit. But those numbers told only part of the story. The harder truth was this: for 7 years, 2 people had turned the language of justice, compassion, and humanitarian relief into a weapon. They had not stormed the gates. They had been invited in. They had worn credentials. They had followed procedures. They had spoken the right words, signed the right forms, and earned the trust of a system that never thought to question them. And because of that trust, communities were flooded with fentanyl. Families were destroyed. Lives were lost, not in a single day, but slowly, invisibly, through a pipeline that looked like charity. This is the cost of silence, the cost of routine, the cost of assuming that order means safety. What Project Sanctuary revealed is that power does not always need violence. Sometimes it only needs patience, precision, and the belief that no one will ever look closely enough to see what's really moving beneath the surface. The operation stopped the flow, but it cannot undo the damage. It cannot bring back the lives lost to overdoses traced to shipments that moved under nonprofit cover. It cannot restore the trust that was betrayed when the very offices designed to protect the vulnerable became tools of exploitation. This story is not just about one network. It's a warning about how easily systems built on trust can be hijacked by those who understand that trust is not a shield. It's a vulnerability. The Abdis are in custody. The network is dismantled. But the architecture that allowed it to exist remains. The gaps in oversight, the procedural blind spots, the assumption that compliance equals integrity, all of that remains. Rebuilding will take years, audits, reforms, new protocols. And something harder than any of that, the willingness to ask uncomfortable questions, even when the answers disrupt the routine. If you're still watching, comment accountability so this story reaches more people. Share it, talk about it. Because the only way to prevent this from happening again is to remember that oversight is not optional. Vigilance is not paranoia. And trust, real trust, is earned by transparency, not credentials. Systems are only as strong as the people willing to question them. And silence, no matter how comfortable, is never neutral. It's always a choice, and it always has a cost. Hit subscribe if you want to see more stories that expose the truth, because this is only the beginning. The fight continues.